Hello, VC. This is Roger, the Jolly Roger channel. Just bringing a entry for Andrew over at Tales from the Crate. He's brought out a interesting thread on the soundtrack of your life, or soundtrack of my life. I've done one of these similar to this. A buddy of mine posted one on Facebook and had us pass it around for about, but you had to do 15 albums. Andy's wanting to keep it to 7 to 10. We'll see if I can do that. With the other one, we had 15, and I still threw in a couple of honorable mentions. But anyway, and as I go through these, just understand I may seem like I'm getting out of different stuff. I'll listen to this stuff, all of it, as I got into it and kept listening to it on and on and on. All through my life, I've never given up any particular genre or anything, and I keep listening to these artists and stuff still today. But just to start out with, well, also Andy over at Andy's Vinyl Den, you're not the only one with your notes. So I've got to keep some notes also to keep myself straight here. But we'll start it off here. I grew up listening to my dad's 45s and albums. He had a great collection of what I want to call roots rock and roll that included Buddy Holly, the Everly Brothers, Bo Diddley, Fats Domino, some Johnny Cash in there, Johnny Horton, Marty Robbins. So I grew up listening to his 45s and some of his albums, and I just fell in love with it all my life. I've listened to music. When I was about 8, we moved into a different house, and some way I was able to get my dad's old stereo put into my room. Now you got to remember, this was not the component stereos like we have now. This was a massive piece of furniture. You know, it was like 4 foot, 5 foot wide by about 3 foot tall and a couple of feet deep, 2 or 3 feet deep. Big old wooden cabinet. Matter of fact, I still have this stereo system of his. And I say stereo, it wasn't really stereo. It was, I'm not sure what they called it at the time, but anyway, it still played great music. And when he did that, when I got that into my room, I would go to sleep at night listening to albums. And this is also, you have to remember, these stereos you didn't just put one record on. You could put 3 or 4 or 5 records and stack them, and as they would drop, they'd play the next one. And so I would go to bed at night listening to my dad's records. Mainly 2 country records, and this was the only country record this one gentleman had, to my knowledge. It was more of a big band type guy, Frankie Lane, Hell Bent for Leather, but it was old western cowboy type music. And the other was this one, Marty Robbins, Gunfighter Ballads and Trail Songs. And I listened to this and went to sleep listening to these nearly every night. I just love these songs, and I have been into the country and western ever since. Really into the, what some people call the cowboy music, talking about the trail songs, the cowboys or horses and stuff like that. Kind of makes me feel like Toby Keith. I should have been a cowboy. I love this stuff. I love the history of that time period. But that record right there, yeah, that's it, man. I tell you, that's got me into Marty Robbins, and I love Marty Robbins ever since. A few years later, we were in a nearby town in Lubbock, Texas. I grew up in a couple of small towns south of Lubbock, and we were in Lubbock, and I don't know how or what, but my dad purchased for me one of my first records, uh, and of course Buddy Holly. Uh, I loved Buddy Holly. Like I said, listening to those 45s and stuff growing up, and being in Lubbock, Texas. Of course, Buddy Holly from Lubbock, Texas. So he picked this up for me and let me have it. And I tell you, I've enjoyed it ever since. And that music, interesting story with Buddy Holly. When I was about 10 years old, 9 or 10, one of the neighbors from on the block behind us came by with some puppies. Well, I was in there listening to the 45s, just getting after it, and there was a knock at the door, and my dad answered it, and he called me to come to the door. Well, I found out it was my buddy out there, and his dog had puppies and was trying to get rid of them. And my dad said I could have one, but I couldn't have one unless I had a name for it. And without blinking an eye, before he could barely get it out of his mouth, I just spouted out Peggy Sue. And so there you go. There's my Buddy Holly connection there too. My first dog, actually my only dog I've ever had, little old mutt Heinz 57 dog. But yeah, Peggy Sue was what I named that dog, and had that dog for many years. Over the next several years, I got up old enough I was able to go out and spend the night with some of my buddies and stuff, and it got introduced to some more rock and roll. I also have a brother that's 6 years older than me. He listened to rock and roll, but his stuff, I never was around my brother that much as an older age. I was always doing my thing with the 6 year difference. He was doing his thing. He got up, he was off, would run around with his friends and stuff. So we didn't spend just a whole lot of time together. Love my brother to death, but still, we just never did get that tight until after we were both up and married and grown really closer since then. But I grew up and got introduced to some by some friends to some Elton John, Aerosmith, Kiss a little bit. But then when in 1976, the summer of 76, I went to a church camp, a summer camp, week-long camp. Like a lot of camps of different types, you know, you had your archery and your trail stuff and swimming and various things, but this was a church camp, and we did Bible study and singing and various things like that. But at that camp, I was introduced to two other bands that just blew me away. First one was some guys had brought a drum set and a guitar and bass and everything, and were playing, and I just immediately was drawn to this music I was hearing. And so I went down there to it, and what makes this kind of interesting is the fact the church I grew up in and still go to church with is a cappella based, no musical instruments, strictly a cappella. And I guess that's why I love harmony so much. A good harmony in a band, I'm sucked in every time. You give me good harmonies and I'm happy. Now if you get some good music along with it, and I'm happy too. But I love harmonies. But here this band, these guys were playing, and I heard them playing Steve Miller Band, Take the Money and Run. And it just blew me away, and I just thought it was great. But the other song that I heard while I was there and made me go back afterwards, as soon as I got home from camp and go try to find this, was this album, Queen, A Night at the Opera. And you can just imagine all of us there at church camp singing Mama Just Killed a Man, Put a Gun Against His Head. You know, kind of ironic that we were all singing that song at a church camp, but Bohemian Rhapsody was huge. We were all singing that song before we left camp. Got me into Queen. Have loved Queen ever since. pity when Freddie Mercury passed away. They have not been the same since, but love me some Queen. That got me into the Queen mode. A couple of years later, we moved to another small town in the area. We moved around a little bit growing up because of my dad advancing in his career with the gas company, moving up through the ranks, and he became manager of the gas company at this one town we moved to, and fell in with some great friends, made some great friends there, and I was able to go to my first concert. My first concert was supposed to be Fleetwood Mac. We had tickets set to go. 2 days before the concert, they canceled the show because Stevie Nicks had laryngitis. Far as I know, they never came back to fulfill that concert. We turned in our tickets, got our money back. But then that following year, I couldn't have started off with a better concert tour or love of concerts. And this band sucked me in wholeheartedly. Kiss, the Love Gun Tour. I tell you, I was into Kiss starting before I saw this concert, but at the concert, I tell you, I was totally into Kiss at that point. As a matter of fact, a couple of my buddies and I even dressed up and painted up and actually put on Kiss Live and played along with it and sold tickets for $0.25 a piece for people in junior high to come see us play. But I tell you, I loved Kiss, still like Kiss, never have got out of them. I say that I got to where I didn't listen to them much. I was a big Peter Criss. I play drums, so I was a big Peter Criss fan. And when Peter Criss left and Ace Frehley left, I felt like I had lost my intro into the rock groups and stuff, and I was disappointed. I still listen to the newer Kiss, the Kiss after Peter Criss with Eric Carr and stuff, but of course this was my intro. Was right here, was big time was this one. Yeah, and this album, I do still have my Kiss Love Gun. Of course, I used it so much the popper came out, so I made my own, but still have the gun that came with it. Then a couple of years later, in school, my 11th grade year in school, there was a girl moved to town, and she caught my eye the first day of school, held my eye, told a buddy of mine, we were in band when I first saw her, and sitting back in the drum section at the back, and I just looked over at her, and I was just fell in love. And I told a buddy of mine, and I said, I'm going to end up marrying that girl. And I did. We ended up marrying, still married to her today. Married to my high school sweetheart. So, but the band I was into at that moment, when she moved in, kind of ironic, was Eagles, Hotel California. I was really into this album at that time. And of course, the song New Kid in Town. I serenaded her to the best of my abilities to that song, with her being the new kid in town, and it was a fitting combination there. I guess it wasn't too bad that she ran me off, but anyway, we ended up getting married, and so that's kind of my connection to the Eagles, and that's what's kept my connection to the Eagles, the love of my wife. So went to several other concerts in my high school years, college years. But when I was in college, I went to, or actually it's the summer between my high school and first year of college, went to see Ted Nugent. And it was Ted Nugent, Pat Travers, And this group that was my, I guess you could say, my true introduction to heavy metal. Turned out to be their first album, but to me they stole the show at this concert. I thought they were excellent, and they were great. Man of War, Battle Hymns. It was such an awesome concert. They put on a show, very theatrical along with it. Great music. I just can't say enough about how much I liked this band. They pulled me in, and then of course when I was in college, I did go on to see some Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, and some others. But this is the ones that got me into the heavy metal side. So you guys that think I haven't done much heavy metal, yeah, I do some metal. I'm not a metalhead as much as most of you guys are, but I do have my metal streak in me. When I was in college, I did get into the 80s stuff, the techno 80s and all of that. But the band that just really sucked me in, that I just loved, this group, this band, Berlin, Pleasure Victim. I love this record. Mainly the two songs on it that really got me in there was Masquerade and The Metro. Those two songs, great song. I don't know. It's one of those deals, I can't pinpoint it, but it pulled me in. Whatever it is, it pulled me in, and I liked it. So that got me into the 80s music pretty good. So, and throughout the 80s, that was a busy decade for me. Starting out in 1980, I met my future wife. 1982, I graduated from high school. 1984, I got married. 1985, graduated from college. 1986, my son was born. 1988, my daughter was born. So, like I said, 80s were kind of a crazy time for me. Just something happening pretty regular, a major event in my life. In 1988, though, when my wife was pregnant with my daughter, it's when we started hearing a lot about music while your wife's pregnant, and how that will affect the child and everything. And the big deal they kept saying was classical music. Well, I didn't have any classical music. I had country and western, I had rock. But I got to thinking, and then it hit me. I do have something that is, for lack of a better word, could be classical. And it's the Beatles, side 2 of the Yellow Submarine. I got to listening to this, and we put that on, and my wife would rock in the chair, and we'd sit there, and even after my daughter was born, we would listen to this record, and especially side 2. It really made me appreciate George Martin's contributions to the Beatles. I always grew up thinking, okay, Beatles, the Fab Four, it was the four. But with this, I really understood and became knowledgeable of George Martin's contributions. I thought he was an excellent producer. He could manipulate the music to the way that he wanted, and he brought out sounds and stuff that I didn't realize, and I fell in love with the George Martin music at this point. And this also kind of pulled me back into the 60s Beatles music also. And but anyway, Beatles. After that, through the 90s and 2000s, like I said, I was married, trying to raise a family, job, just trying to make ends meet. I didn't get out of music, but I didn't go out and pursue a lot of music either. I did listen to all the ones I've mentioned before, picked up a few albums here and there, but wasn't really big into my music as I am now, and as I was in my high school and college days. But in the early 2000s, not late 90s and early 2000s, my dad started doing cowboy poetry, and he became the president of the the National Cowboy Symposium, or the Texas Cowboy Poet Society, the Texas Cowboy Poet Society, and he went to the National Cowboy Symposium a lot there in Lubbock, and various poetry gatherings. And if you're not familiar with those, it is kind of based more on the true cowboys of the Old West, them sitting by the campfire singing their songs about everyday life, and the poetry based on that information and the lives that they live. And I heard a man at this place at one of those symposiums, and he doesn't have any albums out, but he does have CDs. R.W. Hampton. And this man, I just love his music. If you're familiar with Red Steagall or any of that type music, some of Michael Martin Murphey's music that he's kind of gone to now is this style of music, the cowboy music. And if you haven't heard it, I would suggest you try picking this up. I think you have to go to his website to get it. Hell, I can't even find it. Let me get the booklet out here. I think it has his. Yeah, it's just www.rwhampton.com. I don't know if you can see that or not, but that may be blurry. But anyway, kind of back to that Marty Robbins stuff. It kind of sucked me back into those old days of the cowboy, the Toby Keith, should have been a cowboy type stuff. And being out here in West Texas, I don't know, other people probably run into it too, but I never had the horses, but my buddies had some horses, and my dad had some friends that had horses, and so we went out and rode horses, and we went and rounded up cattle for my dad's friend and did some stuff like that. So, I kind of had a connection there, even though it was a thin connection, but to those cowboy life, and I kind of understood it a little bit. But anyway, loved R.W. Hampton, still listen to him off and on as nowadays. Well, and to round it out, this is one genre I haven't mentioned, but I had always heard these different jazz artists and stuff. And I was at an estate sale one time and just looked over in the corner, and there was some records stacked there. And I got to looking, and I came across this record. Jonah Jones, Jumping with Jonah. And they were only like $1 a piece. And I thought, for $1, I'm going to try this out. I kind of had interest in jazz, but I never had owned any. Growing up, I'd listen to see Buddy Rich and stuff on the Tonight Show, Spyro Gyra. Heard some of them on the Tonight Show and various stuff. But that was kind of my connection with jazz. I didn't really know a lot about jazz. Heard some in movies in the background and stuff, and knew I liked jazz, but never had owned any. But I bought this record, and this kind of pulled me into the jazz stuff, and that's got me into the jazz now also. So anyway, hope you like that. I hope it gives you a little insight into who I am and why I'm into certain musics. Like I said, I still listen to it all, different times more than others of different genres, but I do like it all. Andrew, great contest. If you're not subscribed to Andrew, great channel. I don't know of anybody, I don't know why you wouldn't be subscribed. He has some great stories behind his music. He used to own a record store. Very knowledgeable man. As normal, I will leave a link in the comments below. So have a great one. Andrew, good luck with your contest, and congratulations on your subs, and peace and be blessed.